What's up, Thrashers, and welcome back once again to the Thrash Maniac 99 YouTube channel, and I am back with, finally, a new episode of Under the Radar for you guys, and this one's going to be a bit different. I'm actually turning back the clock for the past couple of weeks of albums that I missed, whether it was because I was too tired to do videos, or I was away on vacation, or some I forgot about. So this one's going to be a packed episode of Under the Radar, so we got 6 albums to talk about in this episode, and I figured let's go back to the week of July 22nd, because there was a lot of big albums that came out that week that I missed doing reviews for. And, well, why don't we kick things off with the latest offering from Bay Area Thrashers Hatriot and their album, The Vale of Shadows. So, while I said it's thrash, this is more death thrash, if anything. And yeah, this is a band that formed earlier in the late 2000s, early 2010s out of the Bay Area. Originally formed by Steve Zetro Sousa from Exodus and Legacy. Now it's pretty much run by his 2 sons, Nick and the oldest of the 2, Cody. And Cody actually, good friend of mine, and I follow him on Twitch, and I'm actually a subscriber of his on Twitch. We've become pretty good friends over the past year or so. Played Fortnite with him, but I digress. He's on bass and vocals, Nick on drums, and I forget who they have on guitars, but whenever I'm listening to this album, I'm thinking to myself, well, before listening to this album, I'm thinking, is this going to be more or less like Exodus worship? Honestly, no. Whenever I went in now after listening to this album, it doesn't really have a whole lot of Exodus worship. Like, maybe a little bit in, like, some of the riff work, and also, like, Cody's, like, high vocals kind of remind me of Zetro whenever he sounds demented on an Exodus album. So Cody definitely has his father's, like, high shrill, but Cody also has some pretty solid death growls to him as well. And also the production done by Juan Ortega, who's also been working with Testament, among many other bands in recent years. He does a fantastic job with the production. Like, everything sounds even kiltered. The bass comes through, or cuts through the cut of the mix. The guitars are fucking fantastic. The drum work from Nick Sousa is absolutely incredible. Like, he can play thrash beats, he can do blast beats, he can do mid-tempo grooves, cool fills. Pretty much there's nothing really I could find to complain about this album, I'll be honest. Like, there's some cool melodic hooks on here, some great shredding leads, melodic leads. I mean, I can't think of anything else to say other than I'm going to give this one a 9 out of 10. This is a great album, actually. For those who are unfamiliar with Hatriot, I would say this is a good place to start with their new album. Definitely check it out. This is some really solid, really good death thrash from the Bay Area. That's run by two demon seeds of Zetro, which is pretty badass. So definitely check out this album if you haven't already. Now on to the next album I'm going to be talking about, and that is the latest offering from Swedish Blackened speed thrashers, whatever you want to say, Witchery, with their new album Nightside. Of course, Witchery, somewhat of a supergroup that formed in the late 90s to mix black metal, speed metal, thrash metal with a little bit of death metal. And a lot of big members have come and gone in the band, you know, like Charlie D'Angelo from Arch Enemy and Merciful Fate. You also had Emperor Magnus Occulta, I think that was his name, from Dark Funeral and Hypocrisy in the band at one point. And some others have come and gone, but the main constant has been Patrick Jensen from The Haunted on guitars. And this is the latest album from Witchery, and I've listened to some stuff from Witchery in the past, and it was fun for what it was. So when listening to this, like, it's blackened speed, thrash, death. So I was expecting some wild, crazy stuff, and to be fair, there are some wild, crazy moments on here. Some riffs are really chaotic. You get some almost like almost a Judas Priest vibe to some of the riff writing on this album. And then you get some stuff where it's like some songs I felt were like too short for what they were going for. And then like one song which was like this weird, like chanting spoken word thing I thought kind of ruined the flow of the album for me personally. But aside from that, like, there's some fun riffs that harken back to the old school days of metal or thrash, black metal, what have you. Vocal performance wise, the vocalist, I forget his name, who's in the band now, but he does all sorts of different things. Like, you can hear him doing like the black metal scream, some like thrash delivery vocals, even some death growls. And hell, there's one track on this album that features Jeff Walker from Carcass on guest vocals, and honestly, I think Jeff's vocals, in terms of that more like higher screaming black metal side, I thought were a little bit better than the actual vocalist on here, but of course, that's just me personally. So, kind of an inconsistent album, but there's some really cool moments on here that I could enjoy once again if I listen to it more. I'm going to give this one a 7.5 out of 10. It's solid. It's nothing mind-blowing. Nothing to really, like, say, oh my god, this is the best thing to come out this year. For me, it's not even near that category, but it's not a bad album. It's solid. It's actually a good album. It's just, I was just kind of hoping for more of the actual Blackened thrash side of their sound, where there's plenty of that, but I wish there was more. I honestly feel like this band's gotten overshadowed by bands who have been doing the Blackened thrash thing better than they've been doing, like Hell Ripper and even some other ones that have come along in recent years. I feel kind of do a better job at it, personally. But don't take that as an insult. Witchery's still pumping out some solid material. Definitely check it out if you're a fan. So now on to the next album that came out during the week of July 22nd, and that is the latest album from Imperial Triumphant, and it is called Spirit of Ecstasy. So this is my first time checking out this band. I've heard a lot of hype around them, and I looked at their metal archives, and they're from New York, and early on they were considered neoclassical black metal. Now they're known as an avant-garde, technical, blackened death metal band. A lot of different fusions in their sound, so who knows what to expect. But I checked out this album, and one word to describe this album: chaos. There is chaotic elements all over the place. After all, avant-garde metal in general has some chaotic bands, and I would say this is up there amongst the most chaotic stuff I've heard in a long time. And of course, you know, whenever you're trying to mix up black metal, death metal, some technicality, and some experimentation, and weird ambient elements in there too, some people may like this stuff. For me, I'm kind of hit or miss on this kind of style of extreme metal, though you did get some pretty cool guest stars like Alex Skolnick from Testament doing some lead guitars, Snake from Voivod doing guest vocals on the final track, and of all people, Kenny G on saxophone on the fourth track. But then again, his son was a former member of Imperial Triumphant, and he actually guests on this album too. But yeah, a lot of strange guest stars. Even Trey from Mr. Bungle was on here as well. Man, a lot of different people came in to help out on this album. But for me personally, as somebody who's not the biggest fan of avant-garde, blackened death, technicality stuff like this one wasn't bad. It wasn't bad. There were a lot of moments I enjoyed from this album, but then there were moments where it just felt like the songs kind of dragged on. Like, this album, it's nearly an hour long, and it certainly felt like it went on a little bit longer than that. And that kind of ruins the album for me. It didn't feel like it would go by not sporadically, that it went by quickly within a 54-minute album. It felt like it dragged on, and that's what really brings this album down. And for those reasons, I give this one an 8 out of 10. It's good. It's pretty solid for what it is. It's just there were some elements that just didn't work out for me, but the biggest issue, it felt like it dragged on needlessly for me. But of course, that's just my opinion, and everybody's different. Now on to the next album to talk about in this video that also came out on the 22nd of July, and that is Oceans of Slumber with Starlight and Ash. So yeah, this is, I believe, the fourth studio album, maybe the 5th one, actually. Yeah, the 5th studio album from this Texas-based band that started off more of like a progressive death doom band, and then they morphed into being more straight up like prog doom, and now they're dubbing this album as Southern Gothic metal, which is kind of a weird term to hear because I would not in a million years think that could be possible, but here we are with this album, and one word to describe this: atmosphere. Like, this album is so atmospheric and soundscapey, but yet it retains a doomy vibe to their sound, but also bringing in that more gothic and southern rock inspired stuff. But but it's not like southern rock in terms of like, oh, we're gonna go into like Molly Hatchet territory and write a bunch of like hootenanny songs. No, they just kind of took like some of the, I guess, the folk inspiration, I guess, of southern rock and mash it with this newfound like gothic doom style, and for the most part it worked. Now, I would be lying if I didn't say that I thought Cammy Gilbert's vocals a lot of times reminded me of what would happen if Rihanna sang for a metal band. I would be lying if I didn't say that, because there were moments on here I thought she sounded very similar to Rihanna. Not that it's a bad thing, Rihanna's a good singer in her own right, even though I'm not a fan of a lot of her stuff musically, but she's got a cool voice, so it's not a bad thing. In fact, it kind of helps them a little bit in my eyes. But there are also moments where Cammy gets outside of that realm, and you can hear more of like her take on other influences. I remember I first heard of this band a few years ago, but never really listened to them until now with this album. And I had already heard Cammy's voice on the last Swallow the Sun album, where she and I forget the vocalist's name right now from Swallow the Sun, but they sang beautifully together on the song All Hallows Grieve. So I got curious to hear about Oceans of Slumber after that happened. And with this album, it's got some doom, it's got some goth, it's mostly atmospheric, soundscapey stuff, which I can appreciate to some degree. Sometimes it can be a bit much. Here, I thought they did it right. I give this one an 8.5 out of 10. I thought this was a really good album. For my first time checking out this band, I guess this wasn't a bad place to start. At some point, I would like to go back to their old days when they were a little heavier and a little more proggy, and then catch up on what they're doing now, but that remains to be seen. But this was a really good album. I enjoyed it for what it was. I definitely recommend you guys check it out for yourselves. Now moving on to the next album for this episode, and this album came out July 29th, and I had originally planned to do a solo review for this album, but I ended up forgetting all about it because I was tired, I guess, one day. But I'm finally going to talk about a little bit here, and that is the latest offering from Brazilian death metal maestros Krisiun with Mortem Solis. So yeah, Krisiun, longtime death metal band from Brazil, all the way back to 1990, and by three brothers, and they're still together to this day, which is incredible to think. 32 years of three brothers in a band, and they still get along, and they still can do a band together. Of course, my experience with Krisiun's been very limited. I've heard some stuff before from them, and I've loved what I've heard from Krisiun. After all, it's just fast and brutal all the fucking time, and super evil as well. And this album, definitely no different than anything I'd heard from Krisiun in the past. I mean, you get hyper-speed blasts, crazy brutal riffs, a lot of evil lyrics, and just everybody is in sync together. Like, all three brothers just know how to write some killer stuff. It's very meat and potatoes, but it's the best kind of meat and potatoes you can want. After all, I'm a meat and potatoes guy, so it actually kind of helped this album for me a little bit. And also, with Krisiun, this is my first full album I've checked out from Krisiun. I've heard songs in the past, and I liked what I heard for a full length. So, again, crazy riffing, and it's just the blast beats. Like, some of these blast beats kind of have like a bit of like that Dirk blast feeling to it, where it's like almost like a marching band kind of thing. And you'll hear those especially towards the beginning of the album, like on the opening track in particular. It's like how in the hell can they pull these blast beats off and just maintain a crunch? I'm giving this one an 8.5 out of 10 as well. This is some really good stuff. Obviously, if I check out the older stuff like Conquerors of Armageddon, Southern Storm, and those albums, I'll probably say that those will blow this album, excuse me, English motherfucker, can I speak it, out of the water. So, yeah, I really enjoyed this for my first time listening to Krisiun. Brutal, fast, heavy death metal. What more could you ask for? And now on to the final album of this week's Under the Radar, and this is an album that came out during the week of August 5th, and it's the latest album from Australian tech death wizards Psycroptic with Divine Council. So yeah, Psycroptic, technical death metal band that's been around since '99 and have been fairly consistent ever since they formed. Of course, with David and Joe Haley, the brothers, who are still together to this day as far as keeping the band together and brotherhood together. And this is their latest album. Now, again, never checked out Psycroptic's full lengths until now. And I have to say, for a tech death album, there is a lot of great melodic hooks and groove going on this album, as opposed to the fretboard gymnastics wankery that a lot of tech death has nowadays that I do not care for that much. Yeah, kind of like with black metal, I'm very picky about tech death bands. Like, either they have to have a brutal edge to them or a groove edge to them for me to get into. This definitely fits more along the lines of the groove side. This almost kind of reminds me a little bit of like early Decapitated in terms of the groove-oriented stuff. But the melodies that are on here kind of almost harken back to latter era death almost, like Symbolic and Sound of Perseverance, that time frame. Like, there's a lot of those kind of melodies going on here, but with like that decapitated groove mixed together. And musically, I thought this album was phenomenal. Like I said, balancing the technical play with melodic hooks and groove, and they did it so well. The only complaint that I have about this album is the vocalist, Jason. I wish he would do more like low growls as opposed to like the higher screaming vocals. Like, there were some good growls on here, but this was mostly the high screams, and after a while it got a little bit static for me. Like, and that's the other thing with tech death. It's like, I need to hear more death growls as opposed to screams. So that was really the one thing I felt that kind of held this album back. But other than that, this is a great album. I also am going to give this a 9 out of 10. This was a really, really fun album to listen to. And it's short. It's like under 40 minutes. So, and it doesn't even drag. Like, thankfully, it did not feel like it took forever. It flowed very well together. Nothing more, nothing less. But anyways, that does it for Under the Radar, and yes, there was a lot to talk about. Now I'm actually caught up to everything, which is good. But what was your favorite album out of the ones that I talked about? Let me know in the comment section below, and of course I'll have links to these albums in the description box for you to listen to yourself. And until next time, horns high, see you guys later.
What the heck is fellatio?
Cole, out of all the people in here, you should know what that is.
Every time I'm soft, I have to try to dab a shine.
Is it a new way to torture people?
Getting a little too friendly.
No! Well, it depends on how you look at it.
Wait, so fellatio is stimulation of the penis? Really?
Thanks for letting me do that. I might pick that part.
Cole. It's another name for a blowjob.
Okay. Every time
It's a deep throat blowjob.
Alright, here we go.
Moving on.
Sounds like Carson's getting one right now.
God damn.
This game has gone to hell.